Zoomers, bloomin' Zoomers out there. It's really great to have you. I'm Captain Jim Sharp. This beside me is Meg, my good wife, Meg. What would we do without a good woman to help things along here? Welcome to Sharp's Point, the home of the Sail Power Steam Museum, world famous Sail Power Steam Museum, finest maritime museum in South Rockland. You can't doubt that. My wife and I started this museum a little over a decade ago, and I thought to myself, boy, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to put my feet up in my elderly years and lie and brag, and anybody coming through the door, I could tell them all kinds of stories. Well, I found out that I'm working my head off now. This museum has expanded and expanded until we're just about chock-a-block full, and we've got to do something about it. All we have is a little bit of space left, so we decided we've got to build a new building. So we put our heads together with the architect. Here's a rendering of the new building that we intend to put up. And you can see with the backhoe, under the backhoe, our foundation is installed. It's already there. You can see the museum building beyond under the backhoe. And come spring, in the middle of April, we're going to be hammer and tongs putting the rest of this building together. The building that we intend to have is boat shop, not a boat shop, but a boat storage shed, really, for antique boats. We have 22 antique boats that we're going to be putting in there. Over on the right hand, the big door there is where our big steamboat is going to go. We have a stern paddle wheel steamboat, 40 feet long, lots of woodwork, wood burning boiler, and a calliope on top. And over in the center, beyond our entryway, we're going to have Friendship sloops or Musconga sloops. The next doorway, we have a couple of Harrishoff 12.5s. And the next door, we have a couple of 1920s Beetle Cats that we'll be putting in there. The little tiny door beyond that, we'll have our opti prams. We have 20 opti prams for our sailing school. Our sailing school is one of the greatest things we've come up with for our museum. It's called SKFF Skiff. What is this Skiff program all about anyway? SKFF, Sail Kids for Free. We take kids and we put them through a week sail training school. They come to us 6 years age to 14 years of age, and they don't know a rudder from a centerboard. They don't know how to rig these boats. And look at them down here on the left, down on the float. Here they are, little tiny kids with their life jackets on and their face masks on, and they're learning to put these boats together. On Monday, we put them overboard on a tether. They each have their own boat, so they're distancing, and they learn what the rudder does, and they learn what it does. By Tuesday, we're taking the tether off, and they're in the basin there. We have 2 chase boats that we go out to fish them out of the water if they get overboard. And then by Wednesday, they're turning the boats over and writing them up so they know what would happen to them if they capsize. By Thursday, they're out there around the buoys. And by Friday, this is down on the bottom, that's the race. Great race day is Friday. There's each one of those little guys in their little boats right down there, these little Optimus prams. They're their own captains. They're learning how to be self-preserved, how to be self-reliant, and they're even looking away from their telephones for a change. Look at this little guy down here on the right in the cat fight. He's just so pleased with himself. That's his buddy in the other boat there. And they're racing each other to see which one can go faster. If you can't get faster, then they run into each other, whatever works. Now this is a week-long sail training program for kids, sponsored by the Sail Power Steam Museum, sponsored by your donations to the Sail Power Steam Museum. I want to tell you that we have a promise. We're going to make you a promise that we will double your gift. If you give us $100, that's put a kid through a week of sail training, and we will match that kid with another kid. So you get 2 kids for $100. And my gosh, if you give us $200, 4 kids, $300, 6 kids, and on up it goes. Give 1 entire week sailing instruction for these kids with your support, and we will match it with another kid, so you get 2 for 1. Right up to $1,000 donation. Now, don't turn it down. $1,000 donation will put 20 young ones through a whole week sailing class, and they come out of there just like these kids in the picture here. They're all raising their hands. They want to go sailing. They can't wait to go sailing again. So support kids, support the SKFF program, join the SKFF program, and put kids out on the water, get them away from their phones and get them out sailing. The wish list. My wife says the wish list. What wish list? Oh, I'm not sure just what you're driving at, but we have a wish list. And if you are interested in donating a boat to us, why, we're more than welcome to take it. We're looking for another outboard Boston whaler type chase boat, but we're not sure whether anybody has one of those laying around in their backyard. But we got a long program tonight. We got to get on with it. We're going to do the story of the Merry Day, the history of the Merry Day, incredible Merry Day, the first vessel built for the windjammer business, built as a passenger schooner rather than a cargo carrying schooner, built from the expertise and the ingenuity of a man named Bud Hawkins, Havilah Hawkins, an incredible man, a man with a great imagination and a great thrust for delving into new things. Well, he started out with older boats. He started out with the old Stephen Tabor. I'm sure he started out before that, but I don't know the ancient history of Bud Hawkins. But he had the Stephen Tabor quite a number of years, and then he delved into the Alice Wentworth, and he had the Alice Wentworth. Well, I went over to see him back in 1963. Of course, he was the guru of the windjammer business. With a brand new schooner like that, he was the man to talk to. And I was thinking of buying the Stephen Tabor. I was down in Florida chartering in the Bahamas, and I met a guy named Jim Nesbitt. And he had a couple of old schooners, the Matty and the Mercantile, up in Camden, and offered me a job as mate on them. I thought, well, this would be branching out. So I came to Maine, and I realized how not to do it. I sailed with him for the whole season, and I realized what was wrong with the way he was doing it. And I went and talked to Captain Bud Hawkins, and he told me the way it should be done. Well, I was thinking about that Stephen Tabor. It belonged to Cy Cousin at the time. Bud's had sold it to Cy Cousin. And I decided I would go and bang on Captain Bud Hawkins' shop door. It was late in the season, and it was cold. It was kind of snowy, and a typical Maine day. And the shout from inside the door, "Come in!" I opened the door and went in, and there was Budsy, had a fire going in this barrel stove, throwing wood in the barrel stove, and the fire was roaring in that stove. It was hot as the devil near the stove, but on the other side of the shop, they like to freeze to death. But that's the way it was in Maine. And he said, "Well, Jim, come in. You're just in time for lunch." I said, "Oh, no, but I'm not here to have lunch. I'm here to talk to you about the Stephen Tabor." "Well, good," he said, "sit down. We'll talk about the Stephen Tabor, and we'll have lunch too." So he picked up a hammer off of the bench. He went over to that old rusty barrel, and he brought that hammer down on top of the stove and made a big dent in it. And he took a hamburger patty and he threw it down in the dent. Well, that stove was so hot it was almost cherry red. And right away, the old hamburger patty started to sizzle and snap and crackle, and the juices ran down the side of that old barrel stove. And I thought to myself, here's a man I can admire. This is great stuff. Well, we sat down and we started to talk, and he is telling me about building the Merry Day. I was absolutely infatuated. He said, "Well, if you bought the Stephen Tabor, it's okay." But he said, it's an elderly vessel, and if you don't haul the yaw boat and you treat her easy, you don't take her out in too much wind, don't push her too hard, she'll probably hold together for the next year or two, and you'll get your money back. Well, with that, I decided I got to do it. There's just no other way. I got to do it. And he was an ingenious man. You see what he's holding here. He's holding a model of a wind-driven motorboat. He decided that he could probably go to windward better in a wind-driven, a windmill boat, than a regular sailing boat that has to tack back and forth. Well, there it is. He's got a propeller on one side that the wind would drive, and a propeller on the bottom of it that would drive through the water. And he was experimenting and getting this thing going. And he built a regular windmill boat eventually, and it worked. It was good going upwind, but it wasn't very good going downwind. But it was an ingenious thing. We sat there and we talked, and the more he talked, the more I loved to explore the man's mind. I really believe he was a genius in his own right. I turned around and I looked over at the bandsaw. I said, "That looks like a ping pong paddle." He said, "That is a ping pong paddle. You see that?" And he said, "This is one of my inventions." And I looked, and there was another bandsaw right by the first bandsaw. Well, I looked at the top of the one bandsaw. There was no blade in it, but there was kind of a guide right where the blade would be. And he had this ping pong paddle in some sort of a jig there. I couldn't figure it out, but he said, "Now this is my sample. This is my prototype." And you looked at the other bandsaw, and there was a blade in it, and it had a same sort of jig on it, but it had a blank sheet of plywood on it. Well, he started the thing up, and here the bandsaw would run, and the one on the prototype on the first bandsaw would go around a guide, and it would reproduce that on the second bandsaw and would saw out a ping pong paddle. He was making these things commercially for a toy manufacturing company. Well, I took my hat off to him at that point. He sat back, and this thing spat out ping pong paddle after ping pong paddle. You got to say, a man can't be out of his mind, but he's got to be some kind of a genius to that kind of thing. Well, Buds and I became great friends, and I bought the Stephen Tabor, and Buds went on with his ingenious methods. He built the Schooner Mary Day a couple of years before we sat down and talked about it. And of course, he did all the drawings himself, fashioned it after a coasting schooner, but made it better. He made it a little higher, the cargo hold, a little more space in there for people so that they wouldn't bang their heads on the deck beams. And of course, it was a centerboard boat, just as these coasters were, and a beautiful hull and absolutely amazing shear on it. Look at the size of that rudder, beautiful big rudder with a centerboard and that beautiful big rudder. Of course, that's just the kind of a vessel you should have for the coast of Maine. That thing will turn on a dime. You put that big rudder over and she turns around on the centerboard. You're running through fog. You come up on a island or a buoy, and you give her a little bit of rudder, and she'll turn around and go the other way. And I was so jealous because on the Adventure 230 ton and the Mary Day under 100 ton, light on her feet and turns around so easily. I thought to myself, trying to run the Adventure up to an island, boy, I'd be aground before he could sail rings around me. Of course, he was a fabulous sailor, absolutely amazing man. And the Mary Day came to be. He went over to Harvey Gamage yard. Harvey Gamage built an awful lot of commercial fishing vessels back in those days, cranked them out one after another. An amazing amount of fishing vessels built at Harvey Gamage's yard. Well, Bud said, "Harvey, I want you to build my schooner." Harvey said, "Oh, yeah, well, we can do that." And they started in 7 months it took under construction back in 1962. And finally, they got the vessel pretty well finished up and ready to go. Named it Mary Day. There's Mary drinking a bottle of champagne at the launching. And Buds, who is not only an ingenious man, he's also an artist. And he did a medallion out of bronze of Mary Day, his wife, at that time. And that medallion, I guess, lived on the Mary Day all those years. And of course, the launching went on dead of winter, January 1962. January in Maine, of course, in January in Maine, it snows half the time. There she is going in the water for the first time, and a snowstorm, naturally, a snowstorm in Maine. That's the way a Maine schooner should be launched. And the Mary Day hit the water. Captain Buds went up there. He put all the decking on there, the houses on there, finished the interior, put all the cabins in. Harvey Gamage only built the hull. And here he is putting the last finishing touches with a paintbrush on the trail boards up forward there. Brand new schooner, some proud captain at that wheel, brand new vessel, and the very first new windjammer on the coast of Maine. We went over, he laid the vessel over at Wayfarer, of course, sailed from Wayfarer's dock in Camden in those days. And there's a Stephen Tabor behind him. I don't know what year that picture is. Maybe Hattie or Ronnie could tell us. But that may be the year I had the Stephen Tabor, and I lay there right behind him. It might have been the year before that when Cy Cousins still owned the boat and Ed Porter was the captain back in those days. But I like to think that I was there at that time. I only had 6 passengers my first week, and 2 of them were free. Gordon Bach went with me and another guy. So we had 4 paying passengers, and Bud looked over to me and he said, well, gee, that's too bad. I have people I'm turning away all the time. I'll send them down to you. So very generously, he sent me a whole lot of passengers the next week and the week after that. Got me started. He was an amazing man. Of course, he had a beautiful sailing vessel and he knew how to sail it. He passed everything in the bay. He passed the Stephen Tabor like she was going backwards. He'd go by the Victory Chimes like she was anchored. And of course, he'd stand up there at the wheel, dressed in his blue, and so nonchalant about it. He'd go by a lighthouse like the thing was ashore, and he burned the paint off the bottom of that vessel, I swear. But he always gave a smile and a big wave to everybody he passed. So it was kind of, thank you, Buds, for passing me. But what an incredible sailor he was. I had the old adventure in those days, 1965. My first year, she was painted dark green. She had that little short rig on her. Well, he'd go past me like I was going backwards. And the poor old adventure, she only had half the sail plan she should have. I had to get rid of that. I had to re-rig hers. The next year, I put new masts in her, and we gave her almost twice the sail area that she had in the picture with Buds going by me. We were still fast friends, Buds and I. We into antique cars, and we always had something interesting to talk about every time we met with each other. And we would sail round into the same bays and sounds. And of course, sometimes we'd get together and raft up and we'd have a hootenanny. Buds was a good fiddlist. I played the guitar and he would fiddle away and Gordon Bach, of course, would make music. Buds and I would make noise, but Gordon Bach would make real music. But we would have a great time at our hootenannies. We sailed from Camden, from the shipyard at first, and then the shipyard decided they didn't want us over there anymore. They wanted to put yachts over there. So they could stop. So we went to the town and we said to the town, can we build a facility out in the middle of the harbor? We'll put down 4 moorings. The Adventure can tie up to the moorings. The Mary Day will come in on one side and the Tabor on the other side. We'll put a string out of floats so we can get aboard. And we'd like the town to build the floats and then they can rent them out when the schooners are gone. Well, the town selectmen, they took and fussed around their chin. They decided that they didn't care about the schooners. One of the selectmen got up and he said, the schooners don't do us any good here in Camden. We might as well get rid of them. They take people away from the town. They don't spend any money in the town. They take people away. My God, Camden's the home of the windjammers. In those days, there weren't any windjammers in any other port, but Camden has always been that way. And that was the way the selectmen felt about it. Well, we called a meeting of the whole town, and we got up in front of the whole town and voted on it. And the town, of course, voted to keep the windjammers in Camden. So we built the facility, and there we are. This was the first year I had a topmast up on the Adventure. We had her painted white in that time, and all those 3 boats in the middle of the harbor certainly did look regal. Over on the side was this old Swift property, and there were the Maddie and the Mercantile tied up over there. Well, I decided I would buy that Swift property, and we moved things around. We moved the green schooners out to the facility that we built, and the Adventure and the Stephen Tabor went over to the Swift property, and Buds brought the Mary Day up almost under the falls, way up in the very northern end, the very peak of the parking lot there, and the most prominent position in the whole town. Fabulous place to lay. Everybody down in the public landing could look right on deck of the Mary Day. And to see her up in that, tucked up there in that little cut, that little spot, was just amazing. He would come in, Buds could do that, come in through this whole raft of different boats and tie her up there. And when he went to leave, he'd have to do a curtsy and 3 or 4 spins around and go out through that whole mess of boats. Only Buds could do that. But it was a fabulous place to lay. And that was the facility until finally, later on, they got the facility over at Library Park. Here's an older picture of the Merry Day, a classic picture of the Merry Day, sailing along, and way out on the bowsprit, there are two young fellas, and that's Ronnie and Hattie out there. And Ronnie and Hattie, of course, they're some characters, those guys. They were all over that boat, climbing all over it all the time. And we were always playing tricks on each other. My crew, the euphoria set in. Sailing these big boats, there is sort of a euphoria. You shed discipline, and you just have such a good time. And those boys were always playing tricks on us, and my crew were always playing tricks on those boys. I remember one time I forget what they did. I think they hung a head from an old toilet from our bow on the adventure, something like that. Anyway, my crew went over one night and they put food coloring in the water barrels. And in those days, we had water barrels on deck with our passengers wash their face. Well, they snuck over at night and they took food coloring, and they had one blue barrel and one green barrel. And when the passengers got up in the morning and had to wash their face in colored water, they just couldn't believe it. But they soon figured out that, yes, it was the crew on the adventure that did that. So these two boys, these two young fellas, came over that next weekend when we were tied up in Camden, and they brought boxes of elbow macaroni, and they stuffed them in the folds in my mainsail. Well, we had a whole crowd of passengers. Monday morning, out of Camden we went, and we set the mainsail. All these people from New York and Boston didn't know anything about windjammers, and the mainsail went up, and all this elbow macaroni poured down on top of the deck house. Oh my God, Captain, what is all this macaroni? We were cleaning out macaroni all day long. They said, well, what's this? Is this to keep your sails dry, Captain? I said, no, it's just the Hawkins boys, that's all. Playing another trick. They were all over that vessel. And then Bud's over on the right side there. If you can see, Bud's he's got a line that went up aloft there. And I don't know if this is really the beginning of the Tarzan swing, but he got a hold of the line, and he's seen too many Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies, I guess. And he rigged that line up to the masthead out over the cross tree, I guess, on the Merry Day. And he would swing back and forth across the deck on that thing. Well, he decided when he got to out sailing one day that he would try that out on the side of the vessel. Well, the vessel heeled over. And of course, it made a great ride. He could swing way out over the side of the vessel and called it the Tarzan swing. Well, of course, my crew saw that on the adventure, and they said, all right, guys, I don't know. I guess it was Pete and Mike Anderson back in those days. We got to have a Tarzan swing. Well, I had a topmast up there, and we rigged the Tarzan swing to the very top of the topmast. Well, we had a glorious Tarzan swing then. Gosh, the guys used to jump over the rail up by the anchor and swing way off when they're heeled over, and they'd be out there 50, 60, 70 feet and look back and see the vessel sailing past them. And then they would come back, and just like a swan, they would land easy as a bird landing on the quarterdeck. And it was a wonderful, wonderful Tarzan swing. Well, one day we were up on the northern part of the bay, Buds and I, and it was a very calm day. It's so calm, we were just ghosting along a knot and a half, maybe 2 knots, and we were real close to each other. And we thought, gee, it'd be kind of fun to have the world's largest schooner-rigged catamaran. So we threw a couple of lines over and a couple of fenders, and we came together, and we tied the boats together. And that was all right, but the boats, they kept yanking on those lines, and we thought, well, this isn't going to work. We better not do this because we're going to break something. So we let the lines go, and we kind of separated. We were separated 15 or 20 feet. And I thought to myself, you know, this might be fun. I grabbed the Tarzan swing, and I swung over, and I landed right on the rails of the Merry Day. And it was like it was choreographed, the choreography. I handed him the Tarzan swing, and Buzzy, just like a symphony, he grabbed the Tarzan swing and swung back aboard the Adventure. Now we're sailing each other's boat for the rest of the morning. The southwest wind came up. This was so much fun. I had a great time sailing the Merry Day. He had a great time sailing the Adventure. Strictly illegal. Back in those days, the Coast Guard made us sail on the schooner that we sailed in. Well, we had so much fun sailing each other's boat, we wanted to do it again sometime. And later in the afternoon, we jumped in a small boat and got back on our own schooners. And I said to Buds, you know, when I got aboard the Mary Day, talking later on about it, your passengers were so sullen. I couldn't understand why they didn't say a word to me. They kind of glared at me. He said, you know, I got the same reception on the Adventure. Your passengers were awful, just as nasty as they could be to me. And we realized then that they become so attached to the vessel and to the master of the vessel, the captain on the vessel, that they really rejected the fact that we left the vessel in order to have a day's fun. Anyway, there's me going across the land deck of the Mary Day, and there's Buds coming back aboard the Adventure again so that we could sail each other's boat and have a great time of it. We were always thinking of crazy things to do back in those days. You could get away with it back in those days. And Buds was an incredible sailor. Of course, I had a topmast, so he had to put up 2 on the Mary Day. That was the way we did it. We had this competition between the boats, and it was such a natural competition. We just had to do it that way. Of course, Buds was a great sailor. It took me several years before I got the Adventure tuned up enough so that I could beat him once in a while. Usually he sailed rings around me. He never slacked off. He pushed that boat as hard as he could push it. Of course, here he is going along, and I think probably Ronnie could tell you who's aboard there on that one. Ronnie, are you here? Ronnie, are you there? Unmute yourself a minute. Well, you work on it, Ronnie, and I'll keep.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
I got you there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's it's my father and my brother and I, Havilah and I think it's Billy Grant reclined on the stern with his feet up on the rail. He was a mate for 1 or maybe 2 seasons.
And look at that peapod standing on its stern, dragging along behind.
Yeah, they were only good for about 9 knots. Beyond that, they'd stand up on their stern and actually end up getting swamped. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, he gets pushing that boat. He gets pushing that boat a little too hard, and this is what happens.
Yeah.
it is Billy Grant. I think that's Billy.
There, he's got the palm on, he's got the needle out, and he's stitching up his sails. That's what you have to do in these old windjammers. You can't take the sail to the sailmaker and say, here, put it through the machine. You got to fix it yourself. Just like you got to fix the head, and you got to fix the rigging, and you got to fix everything yourself on these old boats. Well, the competition was keen. We had so much fun doing it. And the passengers loved that kind of thing, sailing the boats as hard as you can sail them and sail them close by each other. So we decided what a great way to get passengers. So we staged a race every Friday. At the end of the week, we would be back in Penobscot Bay getting ready to get into Camden on Saturday. And we would call each other on the radio and we'd set up a race course. So we had this little flyer that we would enclose in our brochure and send out to people. And it did help quite a lot get people aboard the boat. They always look forward to the race day on the last of the time. Gordon Bach, of course, when we would get together after the race and we would raft up, Gordon Bach play the guitar again for us. He was always good for a tune. And time went by. The boys grew up. There's Hattie and Buds. I can't tell you what year that was, but eventually Hattie kind of took over the vessel in 1982. Hattie, are you there?
Yeah. Yep.
There you are. 1982.
That previous shot was Gordon Bach on the Alice Wentworth.
Oh, that was on the Wentworth.
That was on the Alice Wentworth. Yeah. He sailed with my dad on the Tabor and the Wentworth, and Ed Porter sailed the other vessel when he owned both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
He owned the Tabor and the Wentworth at the same time, and Ed Porter they took turns running the boats. And Gordon was one of the mates, and Ed Porter met his wife Laney on the boat. She was one of the dishwashers. I don't know when this was. I got no idea. But that's Gordon in the background, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess probably is. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Got some kind of a lute. Well, You took over in 1982
Yep.
and sailed the boat until it was sold in 1988. Is that right?
Yeah, the last year I sailed the boat was 87. Steve
87.
sold it. Yeah, Steve sailed in 88.
We need you guys to keep me straight here. I'm liable to make up anything.
There's a lot going on, Jim.
Yeah, a lot going on. Now it came up 1977. 1977 was a banner year, and it was a disastrous year in the beginning. I thought we were doing the movie Captain's Courageous at that time, and we were tied up over my wharf. And you can see the Roseway's got all this gurry running down her topsides there. They painted her up for the movie, and the Adventure was painted black, and she had gurry running down. Right behind the Roseway, you see one of the dump tanks there. They had this great big tank that they used to simulate the storm scene and a wave coming over the side of the vessel. Anyway, we looked over, and there was smoke coming out of the back end of the Merry Day. My God, what was going on? We heard the sirens over here. We, of course, couldn't tell. We were trying to make a movie. We couldn't tell what was going on. But the Merry Day was burning up. Somehow or other, I guess it was a paint rag or something down in the main cabin. Like Ronnie tells me it was down under the steps there. And here, the poor old vessel, they finally got the fire put out, but look at the spokes on the wheel there. The spokes are all burned off. Funny that the wheel isn't so burnt, but the spokes are. And I wonder if that's because that's where your hand was all that time, and the oil from your hand permeated those spokes and made it more vulnerable. I don't know, but it seems strange. Anyway, looking down below, whoops. I'll get there yet. There we are. There, the steps were all burned out. And Ronnie, tell me about those steps.
The story goes, or so the gentleman that built the original set of steps, they've got some curve to them, was an employee at the Gamage Yard. And of course, these weren't going to suffice for any longer. So I think my father called down to the Gamage Yard, and I think the same guy was still working there, and he built another set. So I think both sets of stairs were built by the same guy. At least that's the recollection.
But he didn't even come up and measure or anything. He just built them from memory.
Oh no, he must have come up and taken measurements, but
Yeah.
it still was pretty tricky because they weren't easy to. I mean, they've got some curve to them, and so
Yeah.
it was quite a challenge. But yeah, I mean, he came up and probably took some measurements and went away and built them, and came back and plugged them in.
Dropped them into place.
I'm not sure, I don't remember myself, but he may have taken those stairs down to him.
Oh, that could be. Maybe we took what was left of the old set to him.
Yeah, we were pretty busy. I don't remember that part, but
It was only, I think, 2 weeks before the season started. And it was the same year that we were adding topmasts. So we had changed out the bowsprit, built a new bowsprit and a jib boom and both topmasts. And they weren't done yet. We still had quite a bit to do.
Is that right? My
Yeah.
God, you didn't need a fire to build
No.
under, did you? My God.
Like I was saying, there would be kids coming down the walkway. At that time we were tied up in front of the park, but
Yeah.
they'd be coming down looking for a job, and any kid that came along, we gave them a scraper and a mask and a set of goggles and put them to work scraping the charcoal off of the interior.
Mm-hmm. And over in the other picture, Barry, you on? You're on. I know you are, Barry.
Yes, I am.
You want to tell me about that compass box?
So that, if you look at that compass box, you can see on the side of it 2 hooks. And the present compass box of Merry Day has indexing pins in the lid. There's 2 on one side, 1 on the other. So the lid only fits on one way. And Jim, I don't know if you have the picture I sent you, but when we we're rebuilding Mary Day 99, 2000, I took a load of dunnage to the dump. And when I got there to the transfer station, I backed up to the trash heap, which they dutifully bulldozed every half hour. And when I got there, on top of the trash heap was a charred compass box with those 2 hook patterns in it.
Oh.
And I don't know why I got there at that time, but 10 minutes later or 10 minutes earlier, that box would have been bulldozed for all eternity. And yeah, so I picked it up and brought it home, and we still have it. We use it for holding books, but yeah, there's been too many wonderful coincidences like that where, you know, we've discovered a piece of Mary Day's history, either with people we've met or with, well, you know, my favorite thing is go to the dump and come home with more than I arrived with.
Barry,
Yes, sir.
this is Havilah. I got a quick story about that compass. My father was having the Mary Day built in the Gamage Yard, obviously, and he'd go back and forth between Sedgwick here, where we were living, down to South Bristol. The way to get there was down Route 1, of course. He'd go down, and there was an antique store in Rockport, and he'd stop in once in a while to see what they had. And he went in there one time, and there was a compass that he thought he'd really like to have, but he wasn't sure it was the right one. It was a beautiful compass, but didn't know if he could afford it or whatever. Kept on going. And he went back a while later to find out if that compass was still there, but it wasn't. The store was gone. Everything was gone. So the compass, he says, well, I guess I have to find another one. The day that they launched the Mary Day, Bob Douglas gave my father that compass.
Wow.
Bob Douglas is the owner of the Shenandoah, of course, down in Martha's Vineyard. And he walked up and gave my father that compass. It was the one that he unbeknownst, Bob didn't know that he'd ever seen it before. And of course, my father didn't know, but he bought out the whole damn store. He bought all the stuff in the store. He gave my father that compass.
Oh, great. That's Bob for you.
This is kind of an aside, but when we built Havilah and took her down to the vineyard, we hadn't been there but a week and a half. And my daughter went ashore. We all went ashore one day. She stepped out onto the beach. She ran down the beach and found this plastic bottle. In the bottle was a note from Bob Douglas that he'd thrown over in Tarpaulin Cove, and it wound up right behind us on Havilah. I mean, it's just the spooky stuff that happened around that.
Oh my God.
The water, just crazy. It's just crazy. It goes on forever.
Yeah.
I've got a million stories, but that's.
Well,
But I'd add a compass. That was a pretty interesting compass story. That compass has seen some stuff.
yeah. Well, there you guys are.
Yeah.
That must have been in the 1980s.
Yeah, that was when I was driving the boat. And I guess that's the week or two that Ronnie took the boat.
Yeah.
I think we're
And-
making wedding plans.
Time goes on.
Wedding plans.
Steve Cobb came into the picture. I guess you guys were talking it over and finally decided to let Steve Cobb drive the boat. So you sat down and you made an agreement on a piece of toilet paper.
Probably.
Well, maybe it's a napkin. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But there's the agreement, 1988, 1/10 of 88.
I'll be damned. Look at
That's the way it's done.
that. I guess.
That's so typical of Maine. You know, you shake hands and that's an agreement, and you stick by it. That's the way things are done.
Yeah, I don't even remember that, but yeah, that's pretty cool.
There's a piece of napkin that.
Yeah. Wow.
So Steve took over, and Steve ran the boat for 5 or 6 years. Is that right? Or 4 or 5 years. Barry came on as crew. Is that right, Barry?
Yes, yeah. Jen and I had another boat at the time, and we were having a hard time making ends meet. So Jen sent me packing, told me to go get a real job. And I had always, I'd known Steve's reputation. Maine maritime graduate, sailed aboard a number of tall ships as master. And yeah, I wanted to learn from Steve. I could think of no one better to apprentice to at that point in time. And he was kind enough to give me a job. And by the end of that summer, Steve had, his other passion was spending time in the North Woods canoeing. And he came down to the dock one trip and said, "Hey, I'm going to go canoeing. Can you take the boat?" And I didn't know enough to say no. And yeah.
Steve, are you out there? Steve, are you out there all the way in Texas? You on? Steve, you promised me you'd be on. Well, it's a long way out to Texas. And he's off the grid. Yeah, I gotcha. So, well, great. And you finished out the season, and then after that, you just couldn't live without that boat, I understand.
Well, Steve and Chris had some remarkable opportunities that came along at the exact same time. They had some remarkable opportunities in the movie industry with movie production, lighting, and as I recall, the Olympics as well. Steve had a chance to do some production at the Olympics. They needed someone who knew how to rig, and Steve knew that. So they asked if I would drive the boat the next year, and I did. And then we sold our boat, and Jen came aboard as mate in '95.
Steve is here, you guys. His hand is raised and ready to talk. He's unmuted.
Oh, there he goes.
Where?
We can't hear you, Steve.
I don't hear you, Steve.
You're unmuted.
Well.
Is that Steve up there?
Yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah, where the hand is raised, but for some reason we can't hear him. He's not on mute.
Well, it was good to see you, Steve, anyway.
Maybe he'll come back.
Yeah. So there's moving on, the Merry Day, and Captain Barry King took over. Now, I don't know the time sequence here. I don't know if this is chronologically arranged, but there's the family and Captain Barry.
That was me 50 pounds ago.
50 pounds ago?
Yeah.
Well, you took over the vessel anyway, but you had a visitor, is that right? In 1999?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, that visitor was you.
Well, yeah, that was me, but what this visitor that's on there now?
Oh, that visitor. Okay. Yes, that was at the Great Schooner Race, and I had spent as much time as I could with buds, just trying to absorb what I could. And yeah, it just, I mean, I was just born 10 years too late.
Yeah.
Probably 100 years too late, but yeah, I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to spend some time talking with buds, and he agreed to come out that day. I think
how old was he then?
That was just a few months before he passed away. So Ronnie?
A few months, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was July of '99, and if my history's correct, your dad passed away in September of '99.
Probably the last picture of him.
I think he was just short of 80. He was born in 1918.
Huh.
Yeah.
81. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing that was really nice was Buds was always incredibly complimentary of what Jen and I were doing with the boat, and that kind of felt like we had his blessing, and that meant a tremendous amount to us, that we were, doing things right.
Yep.
And
that's a trait of Buds. That's a psychological trait of Buds. He always gives people the benefit and encourages them. He did the same to me, and he was a real gentleman.
Jim,
Well, I
think
sailed that vessel, I think I sailed that vessel 3 different times. Once when we traded with Buds, once with Steve Cobb, and once for you, Barry. And the only thing that I remember is you told me bring him back alive. So
You did.
just to prove it, I brought the picture up. I brought him back alive. See, all I did was play the guitar. Meg did all the steering.
there's
Well,
a talking about my father and other people. He really was kind of a guru. Pete's. We've still got a letter here at home when Pete Seeger called him up to find out about building Clearwater. He wanted to know where he could get a boat built. He sent it Harvey Gamage.
mm-hmm.
But I think one of the highest compliments I've ever heard somebody say, and I can't remember who it was, that he said that my father never met anybody he couldn't learn something from. And that was the way he was. The vessel was a tool to him. I mean, he loved it dearly, but it was a vehicle to carry people, and people were what he was about. Even my brother and I, he said, look, we don't own this boat if it aren't for people. We're not in this first. This is not a sailing business. This is a people business. And I think that's probably the most valuable lesson that I got from him as far as running the boat is concerned. But he was a great man in all kinds of different ways.
He sure was. He was my mentor. And sailing that boat is such a joy. She's so lively and well, just great fun to sail.
She's an awesome.
But you're right.
Jim, Steve is back with his hand up. I don't know if he has something to participate, if we can hear him again. No, same thing, Steve.
Can't do it.
Can't hear you.
Sorry, Steve. So Barry King says, I just can't live without this old boat. So he took it over. And look at it. Boy, isn't she sweet looking? Beautiful, beautiful thing. Barry, you keep it up so beautifully, too. Look at those golden trail boards. What's with the golden trail boards up there?
Oh, that's all Jen. She, if you stand still long enough, she'll gold leaf you.
They've been gold leaf since they were built by Gray Hanna. Built the original trail boards, and they've been gold leaf since then, since they were put on the boat.
They were painted a few years, but it was Jay Hanna, Gray's father, was a model builder in Rockport. He built those trail boards off the lines. He never had the boat. He built them off the lines.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
We replaced them. We did a little whittling and carved pieces after they rotted, but they're the same boards. So they were at that time. They were they were pretty venerable old boards. I think they might have been painted 1 or 2 years, but they were most of the time gold leaf the whole time we had her.
Yeah, yeah.
We actually gold leafed them.
Hey,
On her 1 year.
We got another picture. There's wintertime. There's close up the gold leaf. And this other picture, I don't know where I got that picture, but that almost looked like the Friendship from down to the westward there. What vessel is that, Hattie?
Oh, geez, I don't know. The Mary Day's Gray, so that's when Barry had her. I think that may have been the whatever that big vessel that came into Castine, the fog, there a few years ago. What
was that called?
The Hermione.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Hermione or the whatever. I can't say it in French, but anyway, she was a big French. Yeah, that one.
Really. That's the one. Yeah. Well, they're gold leafing those trail boards, having a great time of it. And now all of a sudden it comes time for a rebuild. I guess the vessel about 40 years old, and that Christmas oak that Harvey Gamage used to build it with, red and green oak.
Yeah.
40 years is a long time, and it's time to do something about it. So that's really great. So you got a project manager named Tom who had been around the vessel quite a long time, I understand, with Steve Cobb. And then uh, came on when Barry took over. This guy named Tom became project manager of this. Is that right, Barry?
Yeah. Yep.
Barry?
Tom was.
Norton.
Tom Norton. That's right. Tom Norton. That's the guy.
He was actually Steve's partner
Yes,
when
that's
they said,
correct. Yep.
and this is Chris Scott, because we can't get Steve, so I might as well tell the story. So he was our
Well-
partner, and then he and Barry, worked it out, and that was great. It was a great way to do it, actually. And Steve and we did have opportunities. I traveled the world being a tour director, and he did a whole lot of things, but it was really good. We had the vessel from 87 until, when Barry, 99, 98.
Fall of 98.
Yeah, 98. So it was about 10 years or so, 11 years maybe. So that it was good. It was a good run. It was good for us. We had a good time. And it was time to move on.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened. And here Tom went to work, and you gotta learn by doing. And here's the old caulker here is putting the waterway streak on there. And
Well, everybody that had her just put their love into that vessel. And when it was time for us to go,
yeah.
just dying, how are we going to sell this vessel without losing everything, which would have happened, I think, because she's not set up to, people want to take her to the Caribbean and all that, but she just wasn't set up. And so we thought, I'm talking for Steve too. We thought that we needed to keep it with someone here who would love it, rebuild it. And that's what happened. It was great.
Well, we went into the rebuilding stage here, and Tom Norton, he drew out every single plank, as I understand it.
That's right. He loved
And
the very beginning, from 1987, when he was a classmate of Tom Norton, and that was from Maine Maritime. And those classes, they really stick together. They're amazing.
Tom, are you on, Tom?
I am, Jim. I'm taking it all in. Thank you.
There you are. I want to talk to you about this, putting the keel bolts into this keel. Tell me about who are these guys with a drill drilling up through the keel?
Well, I have to say that's the next generation. That Matson coveralls are being worn by my son Scooter, Jared Norton. He and a classmate of his donated their entire spring break from their second or third year at Maine Maritime Academy to come work with Barry and I down under the boat. And those two literally jacked and drilled and replaced most of the keel bolts. And he's on this call. I don't know whether he's going to come on or not. He's in the Woodlands, Texas, taking this all in. But anyway, I guess what I'd like to say in the very beginning of this is all of a sudden the captain's quarters has actually let engineers in on one of these sessions, and and it was Steve Cobb and Chris too that introduced an engineer into the Merry Day, sort of not in the sense of needing one necessarily, but I was the engineer and Steve had the deck license, and we've now continuing on with Barry and Jen. I've always enjoyed the fixing, building, repairing, engineering, managing type work almost as much as the sailing. And this is proof that the next generation, my son, was down underneath the thing, putting the new bolts into her. So anyway, it does occasionally take a village to make something work, and I'm honored to be part of it.
There you go. There you go. Well, it's great to see the next generation coming too. We got to keep moving here. We still got quite a little distance to go. All those top timbers sticking up there and the night heads, and finally getting it together, getting some paint on her, getting the deck. Look at that beautiful deck on there. Isn't that pretty? It certainly is a lot prettier than the old fiberglass. But how's it working out, Barry?
the warranty's not up yet, but we think she's holding up pretty good.
Yeah,
25 years in, I was told she'd come with a 100-year warranty. So
I see. And
my
there's the,
neighbor around the corner is the one who helped us engineer that. And so I know where he lives. I know where to find out what's going on and where to collect on the warranty work if I need to.
great. And that's Buzz's rocking chair up on the deck there?
Well,
That's
that
the same
is, so that rocking chair, actually, Chris and Steve bought that rocking chair
Oh,
early on, and we have never taken that off the boat. That is,
mhm.
you know, Hattie was talking about, you know, this business is about the people.
Well, Bud's had one
And for
one
us,
aboard
it's,
years ago. He had one aboard, as I remember.
yes,
But,
that's correct. And
Maybe it burned up in the fire or something.
yeah, I don't know. We've never taken that off. It's what this business is all about. Giving
Yeah.
people a chance to relax.
Yeah. And then the fantail and the transom. And here's the crew. Now, who are these guys?
Oh, boy. Well, there is, the man with his back to us actually sailed with all of the Hawkins. That is Steve Fassett. We call him Chips because he was always whittling on the boat. First time I ever met him, he drove me nuts because I would run around the boat sweeping up wood chips behind him. I didn't know that was kind of the gig, but over to the left is Dave Allen, who Dave and his wife Sue rebuilt the Jamie rigging.
Yeah.
In the middle, in the burgundy shirt, is Brad Ellsworth, who has become quite the shipwright in his own right. Works for Yachting Solutions on as kind of their, well, he's the guy who makes all those beautiful boats come out of Yachting Solutions right now. And the young fella over there on the right, that would happen to be Captain Garth Wells.
Oh,
Really?
Well, it's 20 some odd years ago. He was just a teenager then. He may still be a teenager. I don't know. He is the fountain of youth. Yes, that's Garth Wells.
Great. Quite a crew.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there she is on all her finery. Isn't that beautiful? Pretty exciting. Getting ready to break the champagne. And Jen there, yeah. And get the vessel launched.
I need to bust in for a second because this is really important. We asked Mary if she would come and rechristen the vessel, and she was quite adamant that Jen needed to do that. That it was Jen's turn.
oh,
And I thought that was probably one of the nicest things anyone's ever done. It just, yeah, I fortunately had a chance to spend a lot more time with Mary than I ever had to spend with Buds. And she recognized what the boat was and recognized a new family. And she came to the launching and just insisted that it would be Jen who christened the boat.
Great.
oh, that's wonderful.
I was pregnant with me
Terrific.
that day.
Oh my gosh.
And on my back is Sawyer, that little guy up there sticking the little head behind my head.
Oh. Uh-huh. And there's the main cabin, looking quite yar. Everything beautiful and in its place. Fresh flowers on the table, all proper. Happy passengers. And look at that eagle on the stern. Who carved that eagle on the stern, Barry?
That was carved. So that was a present to the schooner for her 50th. A fella up in South Blue Hill, Don. I'll remember his name at midnight and call you. But there's a fella up there who we met through the Candage family, and we gave him a drawing and gave him the dimensions, and he carved it right out and jig time.
Yep,
Beautiful.
it is
That's nice.
beautiful.
Me now. Can anybody hear me now?
Hey,
Am I there?
Yes, you
Yay.
are.
Hey, hey,
It's amazing what
Yeah,
happens.
you're- you're sideways.
You're sideways, but we can hear you.
No, you're all sideways.
Well, I can still stand on my head.
There.
How's it? The better?
Gee.
It's my phone. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll have to hang on to it.
How's the weather in Texas?
Oh, it's nice. No, last week was just like home. It was amazing.
Oh, well, I'm glad you got on here anyway. Good.
Yeah.
Barry's off getting lobsters. We're going to have a lobster cookout now.
So,
Oh, nice.
Jim, I have a question. I
Yeah?
have a question for Ron and Hattie. Who built the yawl boat?
I was just about to break in. Arno Day built that yawl boat.
Arno, I thought so. Yeah.
Arno was my mother's brother. And for a point of correction early on, you said that my father built the interior. Arno, my father hired Arno, who went down to South Brooksville and actually South Bristol and actually put the interior in the Mary Day.
Oh,
He
is
did-
that right?
He did that while my father built the rig. And that yawl boat was built
Oh.
by Arno Day around the same time, obviously. We used it the first year, but that's a venerable little vessel right there. That boat's taken an awful beating. and she's probably one of the oldest boats in the fleet now.
Yeah.
I think she's the oldest yawl boat in existence.
Yeah, the one that my father had built for the Stephen Tabor just before that, I think, was still out on Lake McGonagall. Or she was a while ago.
Really?
But yeah, and I rode home from Brooklyn on that when I was about 8.
Gee.
Yeah. No, Arno
Yeah.
Davis right in, it was actually, I have the model out in the shop, the lines for it in the shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's the family.
Yeah. And speaking of generations, Tom inspired those two to go to Maine Maritime Academy as well.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Nice homey picture. This is what they do for entertainment. I love that picture. That's a great one. And this is what happens. You read and you play music and you sleep, and this is what you do on a windjammer, right?
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Beautiful
most of
sail.
the time.
Hmm. What could be prettier than that?
I don't see any of those pictures. There it is.
Who's that up on the cross tree with you?
That's right. That's Sawyer.
Sawyer?
Yeah, he went from the cross trees to the engine room. Uncle Tom corrected him.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Well, beautiful vessel, that's for sure.
Just trying to get in.
Little fog coming in. We used to worry about fog. I used to worry about fog all the time. Buzz used to say, well, don't worry about it till it's here, then worry about it. Nowadays, all you have to do is look at the scope and no problem.
Jim, as I like to say, the scope is 125-cent fuse away from death and destruction. So
That's right.
good to have the old school too.
Well, just have 2 scopes.
My
If
dad
one does-
came up,
One
We
doesn't
could-
work, one doesn't work, you throw it overboard and you get the other one out. This is the winter of the pandemic problem. So all the boats are covered up. Isn't that sad? God, it's so sad. But the inside of the vessels look like this with the plastic covers on them. I think that's kind of neat. You can work on them and live on them and do great things.
there was am I muted? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know why I happened to think about it, but our Coast Guard required escape hatches on top of each cabin on that foredeck.
Yeah.
Talked about the story. They said they insisted we have them, but we didn't need much inspection. She was an administrative oversight. But they said they ought to have a way to get out of these cabins. So they found the biggest person at Harvey Gamage's yard and built a square that if they could get it down over him, that was the right size for that.
Pretty
My
good.
cousin one time was on board sailing with us, and he made a misstep and went right down through one of them and landed in the triple cabin beneath with a bunch of girls getting ready to go swimming. He was quite. It was a surprise for both. Anyway, that's the stuff you remember from years.
Good story. Good story. There's Christmas time. I don't know how far you had to chase the guy to get that scraggly looking tree, Barry, but at least it's big.
My friend Linus helped me pick it out.
Charlie Brown.
Yeah, look at all those stars up there. Boy, that's the Maine coast for you. Isn't that pretty? Great stuff.
Oh,
Good shot.
well,
And
am I still on here? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was just thinking of a story that with Addie would probably remember back from just before we had the Merry Day. I was running When and If, and everybody was up in Bangor for the last time we could beat before they built the bridge. And everybody was all anchored up. There must have been a dozen schooners already. And we looked down the reach, and here comes Merry Day and Heritage. Wing and wing, both sides, all the way up, doing about 12 knots each. And Heritage dropped her anchor just about the same time that Merry Day did, both still running dead before it. And Heritage rounded up and came to a stop, but Merry Day did not stop. She just kept on going, just plowing up the sawdust underneath the river there, which is about 12 feet deep. Hattie sailed right by us and looked over, and he says, "Oh, well," and headed for the biggest, fluffiest tree he could find on the brewer's side and ran the bowsprit up onto the beach on that side. All the yawl boats go running over like moths to a flame. And it got real quiet. And then you hear this juba, 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 juba. And a big limb falls out of the tree that he put his bowsprit right into it. And then another limb falls out, another limb falls out. And all the boats grabbed him and pulled him back out in the middle of the river, and they dropped the hook and found a spot that would stick. I was wondering if you remember that day.
Yeah, I remember it slightly different, but yeah.
Well,
I couldn't
it has to
get
be slightly different.
I couldn't get by Doug. We were stuck side by each. We couldn't get apart. So I went as far off to the Bangor side as I could get to give him room. He rounded up and got a foul of, I think, the rigging or something in the process. Meanwhile, I had 80 feet of chain and my biggest anchor out, all ready to go, right? Because I figured, well, the hell, that ought to stop her. But I could remember now the sound of that anchor going tinkety-tink on the bottom, like a cobblestone street. There was no bottom in that town. Even after we came off the thing, I couldn't get a hold of it. But actually, it was Steve Cobb who said, if there's any place to anchor, if there's anything soft, it'll be on the brewer side, because they had a sawmill over there. So Steve, I remembered that conversation when we were all talking about going up in there. And I got misquoted. When I went by Steve, I said, "What do I do now?" And he looked at me. He looked at me like I just went off of Mars. But the thing that astounds me is I didn't pick up somebody else's anchor on the way through, because I was dragging that thing all up through that fleet. And she never, contrary to popular belief, she never went ashore. She never touched bottom. And we had a couple of branches in the boat. The big thing is my biggest regret, first of all, is I didn't get the brown trouser flag. Everybody else in the fleet had gotten it by then. And I figured if anybody got a brown trouser flag, I should have gotten it. But instead of that, I had to live through the humility of every time I took a branch out of my bowsprit that summer, somebody else would come along and stick another one in. So that's how I remember it.
That's a good one.
There was no place to go. I had to do something. I ain't going under that bridge, and the tide was going, the breeze was coming. I said, this ain't good. But anyway, better stopped.
It was very colorful.
Yeah,
Very colorful.
4th of July, no less.
Yeah.
But the big fun of that trip, I'm sorry, I jumped. The fun on that part of that trip was we, the next morning, went out of there, myself, and I think the Janie Riggin and I can't remember the other boat. There was another one. We 3 of us rafted up and pushed the whole length of that river in a raft with 3 yawl boats steering the Mary Day from the middle. We all had breakfast on the way down the river. It was beautiful. Fun.
Yeah, I remember that.
Who was the other one? Was it Tabor maybe?
Great. Well, this is the last slide.
There you go.
Bid you adieu. And we're going to tell you what's coming up.
May the wind always be at your stern.
The next
Oh,
thing
nice.
coming up is the Schooner Victory Chimes on March 9. So all of this, this will be on YouTube in a few days. You guys can get it on YouTube, and it will be preserved for posterity forever and ever. So there you go. And we're going to do the Louis R. French, the American Eagle, in March. And then April, of course, we're going to be building our building. Everybody's going to be outfitting their vessels for a big season. And I'm not sure what we're going to have in April. We may cut it back to 1 Zoom a month instead of twice a month, because everybody's going to be getting pretty busy by this time, I'm afraid. We hope. But keep your eye on the website and see what comes up over the summer. And we're all hoping for a great summer. If you get bored and need something to read, you can always get a copy of my memoirs here, Reckless Abandon, schooner stories, 40 years of voyaging, 4 of the biggest schooners on the coast, and some of it's even true. So you can get that at the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum. Let's open it up for kibitzing. Anybody else have any questions?
Horton sailed on the Mary Day with my father for a few summers, quite a few
5
summers.
years. It's Horton here. I had the great good fortune of walking down the dock in 1977, just a little after that fire. And you guys needed someone, so your dad hired a 15-year-old who hardly knew his left from his right. And Dick Cadwallader, who's on, was chief mate that year. And Hattie caught it just right when he said that the windjammer trade is a people business. And I spent 5 beautiful summers essentially sitting at the cruise table on the Mary Day, getting a seminar every night with your father, Ronnie and Hattie. And he was like a father to me, and your mom was like a mom to me. So
yeah,
a lovely evening. Jim, thank you for organizing this.
Oh, thank you all for coming.
This summer is the 50th anniversary of our first sail on Mary Day. My wife and I met on the Mary Day in 71. We were married in 74.
That's crazy.
And we've been back and sailed with Buds and with Hattie and with Barry and Steve. And it's just been, it's a people boat is right. The family's been there. The kids have all been there. The in-laws of all our son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws have all been there. Or not quite at the son-in-law. We got one son-in-law to bring out, Barry.
I don't know where he is. The speaker.
See, sounds like.
Can I weigh in here? Dick Cadwallader.
Dick Cadwallader.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Horton said, that Buds and Mary and the boys were some of the most welcoming people I've ever met. And I'm getting emotional, but I think they changed a lot of lives for all of us. And you can't put a value on that. So thank you.
Yeah.
More than welcome, Dick.
Sure.
My favorite Dick Cadwallader story, the day you showed up, we set you to work digging a hole in the beach. Put a dead man in.
Yeah.
One of the nastiest jobs I think I've ever seen. And I think you gained 50 pounds that summer.
Yeah, I did.
My memory serves, I think you gained 50 pounds that summer.
It was trial by fire. Yeah, it was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, that was good. That was a lot of fun.
And Carrie Bell's cooking.
Carrie Bell's cooking would do it. Yeah.
And singing.
Yeah.
I just love Carrie's voice. She had one of the most
Fantastic
beautiful voices.
times. Fantastic times.
By the way, if you ever get a chance and you can find one, get Captain Hawkins' Choice and listen to some of the guys singing. That's just a wonderful album that he and Gordon Bach put together with all the music that came off that boat was just stunning. I never could keep up, but I still have dreams about it.
Well, your dad said something when I went up to work to apply for the job. He said, "Tell me about the sailing you've done." And I told him, you know, how I'd grown up sailing and was interested in traditional vessels and everything. He said, "Do you play any music?" I said, "Yeah, actually I do." He said, "That's fine." He said, "I can teach anybody to sail, but I can't teach people to play. I want people on board who can play music." So that was a job requisite. So.
No, you really, if you can play an instrument, you usually got the job. You can teach anybody to sail, but not anybody.
Exactly.
Be good with people and play music.
Your dad would say, I'm going to add the strains of the violin here, but in my case, it's literal.
Yeah. One of my favorite, I think Gordon still has it. One of my favorite woodcuts that he ever did was my father leaning over the stern with a concertina while Gordon Bach tuned the elbow. They'd be pushing along on a quiet day, and he didn't need any disharmony with the elbow going the wrong speed. He tuned the elbow to the concertina, and then the guitar to the concertina, and then they could play after that. It was fun. I remember that distinctly.
Don't change the RPMs on the elbow.
Yeah, yeah. So it didn't interfere with the harmony. No, the good times were had by everybody.
Yeah.
It was, indeed.
Jim, can I pass on a story?
What's that?
Can I pass on a story? This is John
Sure.
Brew. I was stationed in the Coast Guard down in Woods Hole back in the late 60s, early 70s in the Shenandoah.
Yeah.
Of course, was sailing out of there. And we were in Nantucket Sound working buoys one day. It was July, it was hot. And the captain let us have swim call. So we're all getting ready. We're in our bathing suits and stuff like that. And the Shenandoah just happened to be coming up, you know, right up beside us. And so we're standing there, guys are diving off, going back to the cargo net, climbing up and things like that. Well, one of the guys came out on deck and they blew the ship's horn, and a couple of the bosuns had this all planned, and everybody on the Shenandoah looked over at us and they pulled down his bathing suit, and poor guy didn't know what to do. So he just jumped over the side. Current was so bad, he couldn't stay in the water. So he had to climb up the cargo net with just the way he was. And they were banging on the side of the Shenandoah, and they were having a wonderful time watching them.
Oh my. Mm-hmm.
That's Bob had the Shenandoah built. He wanted to have her on the same ways as the Mary Day, but Harvey Gamage couldn't wait. He had to build a dragger in between them. So there was a dragger in between, but they were both built on the same ways. Bob did all of the.
It was a beautiful boat.
Yeah, he did all the table of offsets for Shenandoah on our dining room table. He found the lines for the Shenandoah on our coffee table in History of American Sailing Ships. She was a Joe Lane. And they met when Bob bought a peapod off my father and showed up. He drove a 31 Ford mail truck out from Chicago as a student. picked up that peapod back in, I think it was about 53, 52, 53, about the time I was born. And they were fast friends ever since. But yeah, they go. He was another uncle to me for many, many years. Still is.
Well, how about Jim and Ronnie and Havilah? Remember when Bob Douglas brought the Shenandoah up? And
damn near killed us.
77 or 78.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Yeah.
He almost destroyed the fleet. If I remember right, the Adventure jibed over and busted her gaff. We jibed over and lost the main sheet and screwed up the topsails shroud backstay off the main topsail. Had to go out and get the end of the main sheet was stuck out on the end of the boom. Bob could jibe her back and forth, no problem at all. The topsails kept him moving, so and with all that rig, she could jibe it. We damn near destroyed the fleet just coming up from Monroe Island. But that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was quite a weekend.
Yeah. And then they almost had to throw us out of the garage because of the shanty singing. They had a band book, but we didn't want to listen.
And
that wind was making and making and making as we were coming up the bay, and you guys decided you were going to go to Pulpit Harbor. I said, Pulpit Harbor? I don't want to go to Pulpit Harbor. I got a jibe to go to Pulpit Harbor. And Leo Hines was the amazing fisherman when had that vessel when she was a fish boat, and he was standing alongside me. He said, well, if you don't jibe, you lose the race. I said, well, I know that, Leo, but what am I going to lose if I jibe? Well, anyway, we sheeted it down as hard as we could, and my God, we took a turn around that thing, and when she jibed over, I let it run out the cleat, and I swear it was smoking on the cleat there. Yeah. But of course, the gaff went over faster because it didn't have anything to hold it back, and fetched up on the rigging and broke.
Yeah.
And I called Earl and Quinn, go up and get that oak we had up in the attic and saw it up into inch strips and put it on the first ferry boat in the morning, remember? Yeah. And he sent it over to us. We fished that thing. We took the main topmast staysail sheet and we used that to go around it and fished it up, and we had the gaff set back up again by 10 or 10:30. Yeah. And then we all sailed to Pulpit Harbor.
Right.
That was quite a day, all right.
We had the scuppers down pretty hard. We rounded up in Gilkey's that day, but it was a good breeze. Not very often you get to see 3 big vessels of that ilk sailing around in one place. That was pretty spectacular.
I remember getting a glimpse of her centerboard when you guys rounded up in Gilkey's Harbor.
Well, I was about to tell that story, but I didn't think anybody would believe me. But I was standing on the side of the pawl post when I got ready to let go of the anchor.
I was on Shenandoah. I sailed up from the vineyard with him and was on Shenandoah when the Mary Day rounded up. And because Bob was trying to pay attention to where he was going to anchor, and I said, Bob, you got to see this. And pointed over to the Mary Day, and he saw, it wasn't the centerboard, it was pretty close to the keel. She was really laid down. That same week, he was, I don't know, somehow or other, it was late in the day. So I said, well, we can go to Pulpit, and it was getting dark, and I said, we'll just steer for that light. And he thought he was just sailing to the shore. He hadn't been into Pulpit after dark, but we found our way in, but it didn't look like there was any place to sail into. So he was a little nervous about that. But
the way he tells that story is that you told him to sail for the light in that little red farmhouse. It's just about the time we were go in, they put the lights out and went to bed. Light went out.
Well, we could probably talk half the night away here telling sea stories. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank everybody for chiming in on this, and keep your eye on our Zoom broadcasts from the Sail Power Steam Museum. Come down and see the museum when we get rid of this pandemonium here, and come and see our new building. So I'll sign off with you all.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.